Close your eyes and imagine this. It's 1776, cannons thunder, muskets fire, and the smell of gunpowder fills the air. The American colonies, a fragile band of revolutionaries, are fighting the most powerful empire on earth, the British Crown. But picture this. Instead of victory, the revolution fails. George Washington surrenders. The dream of independence dies before it's even born. What kind of world would we live in today if America lost the Revolutionary War? In our real history, the American Revolution was one of the most unlikely victories ever recorded. 13 colonies, outnumbered and underfunded, somehow defeated the mighty British Empire. The war lasted from 1775 to 1783. Against all odds, the Americans secured independence, creating the United States of America, a nation that would grow into a superpower. But what if that story never happened? What if the colonies remained under British rule? Now imagine a world where the turning points of the war go differently. What if George Washington's army was crushed at the Battle of Trenton? What if France never joined the revolution? Or what if Britain managed to choke the rebellion with sheer military might? In this alternate timeline, the rebellion collapses. The colonies remain part of the British Empire. The Declaration of Independence is nothing more than a forgotten draft. And the world we know today takes a very different path. The first consequence would be brutal. Leaders of the rebellion, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, would likely face execution for treason. The Crown would make examples of them to ensure no colony ever thought of rebelling again. British soldiers would occupy key cities, Boston, Philadelphia, New York, tightening their grip on the colonies. Freedom of speech, revolutionary newspapers, and dissenting voices would be crushed. Life for ordinary colonists would be harsher. Taxes that once sparked the revolution, on tea, stamps, and trade, would likely increase even more. After all, Britain had fought an expensive war and would demand repayment. But this was just the beginning. Because beyond America's borders, the ripple effects would shake the entire world. With the revolution crushed, Britain would emerge stronger than ever. The colonies remained rich with farmland, trade, and resources. Britain would dominate the Atlantic, controlling commerce from Europe to the Caribbean. But what about the other colonial powers, France and Spain? In our timeline, France's support for America was crucial. It drained Britain's strength and gave France hope of reclaiming its global influence. But in this alternate timeline, France never joins the fight. Or worse, they do and are humiliated. The French monarchy, already unstable, would avoid bankruptcy from funding America's war. That means no American example of liberty to inspire the French people. Without the spark of the American Revolution, the French Revolution of 1789 might never happen, or it would come much later. Imagine a Europe where kings and queens remain unchallenged for generations longer. No Bastille, no cries for liberty, equality, fraternity. Monarchies might dominate the continent far into the 19th century. And in North America itself? The frontier would change dramatically. Expansion westward, the dream of manifest destiny, would be under British control. Indigenous nations might find themselves in a different kind of struggle, caught between British settlers and imperial rule. But this was only the start, because soon the entire globe would feel the shockwave. Here's where the world really shifts. The United States, as we know it, never rises. No constitution, no Bill of Rights, no democratic experiment that inspires revolutions across the globe. Without America, where would the world look for freedom? Latin American independence movements, led by figures like Simón Bolívar, drew direct inspiration from the American Revolution. Without that spark, many of those revolutions might fail or never even begin. By the 19th century, Britain would not just rule an empire, it would rule the empire. A North America fully under British control would provide endless resources, manpower, and wealth. Britain might become an unstoppable superpower centuries earlier. But that also means the world wars, the Cold War, even the technological age would unfold differently. Think about World War I. In our timeline, America's entry turned the tide against Germany. But if America never existed, Britain would fight alone, perhaps unable to win. Could the Central Powers have triumphed? Or World War II? Without the United States, who stops Nazi Germany or Imperial Japan? Would Britain be crushed under Hitler's Blitz? Would the Soviet Union stand as the sole superpower in the post-war world? And then there's technology. Without American inventors and innovators, no Edison, no Wright brothers, no Silicon Valley, would the world see airplanes, electricity, or the internet at the same pace? Perhaps Britain or Germany would lead innovation, but global progress might be slower, or take a very different path. But even beyond wars and technology, culture itself would never be the same. Fast forward to the modern era. No United States means no Hollywood, no jazz, no rock and roll. English would still spread globally under Britain, but American culture, movies, music, fashion, would not shape the 20th century. Instead, imagine a world where London, not New York, is the center of modern culture, where British ideals of hierarchy and empire, not American ideals of liberty and democracy, dominate global politics. The Cold War, as we know it, might never exist. Instead of a US-Soviet rivalry, perhaps it's Britain facing off against the Soviet Union. Or maybe the Soviets rise unchallenged, spreading communism across Europe and Asia without American resistance. And here's the most chilling thought. Without the US leading the fight for democracy in the 20th century, the idea of freedom itself might look very different. The world could be far more authoritarian, dominated by empires and dictatorships rather than republics and democracies. But here's the twist. Perhaps humanity would still find its way to liberty just later. Maybe revolutions would eventually rise in other nations. But the timeline of history, the wars, the culture, the progress of science, would all be delayed, reshaped, rewritten. Each of these possibilities leads to a bigger question. Would the world be darker without America's influence, or more stable under Britain's rule? Would we still reach the moon, discover nuclear power, or build the internet, without the United States driving the race? Because the failure of one revolution in 1776 might not just change one nation's destiny, it could alter the destiny of humanity itself. So, what if America lost the Revolutionary War? Maybe the world would belong to Britain. Maybe democracy would come later, or not at all. Maybe the wars of the 20th century would have ended very differently. But one thing is certain. The American Revolution wasn't just a fight for independence. It was a spark, a signal to the world that ordinary people could stand up to empires and win. Without that spark, would we still live in a world of freedom and democracy today? Or would we still be subjects of kings and queens? The answer is left for you to imagine.